All right, so I looked over your consultation form, and you know, there. Or feel free to have a seat. We're doing the consultation form. And like you have a system to like introduce to like people and stuff, and you kind of work like you have a workaround of like greeting dogs on the street, like that's been going well once the dog doesn't react. Is that correct?
Yeah, she won't pick a fight with the dog on the street, but she'll match their energy and win.
Okay.
So if a dog comes at her, she's gonna go for him.
You reciprocate? Yep.
People, I don't bother letting anybody meet her on the street.
Okay. Yeah.
If we have guests over, we use the muzzle. They meet outside
Okay.
and slowly get used to each other.
Gotcha. How long have you had it for?
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
And did you notice this behavior like from the get-go, or is this something that happened progressively?
Progressively got a little worse. I think because she was being moved around. We got her from just a dog rescue agency. She was moving around. She seemed okay with people, and then after a while, she just started getting worse.
Yeah, we originally lived in South Pilsen.
Sure.
And I think people on the street that she saw were a little more high risk than they are now. Or I mean, there were more people that she probably should have growled at. Like we had some
Like suspicious people?
Yeah, some instances
Sure.
back then.
Okay.
And I mean, it was probably 2 or 3 times, but we probably made the mistake of like thanking her for it.
Oh, sure. Like you
When
praised her for the behavior.
when that would have.
Sure.
We didn't have an issue with people at first. She did have an issue with dogs, and then it kind of flipped.
Sure. And now she has an issue with people and is actually better with dogs.
Correct.
Yeah,
As
I mean,
long as she like you know, like they're chill or whatever, they're not.
on a leash, yeah. I don't bring her to the dog park.
Okay. When have you seen these instances of, you know, aggression or aggressive response when it comes, I believe when people coming in the home, but so your workaround is you meet out the home, you have a lot of treats. On the way home, that person gives her a lot of treats, and then once they go inside, like it's at that point fine.
Yeah, well, we keep the muzzle on for probably 5 or 10 minutes inside.
Sure.
Just
Yeah.
one out.
You can kind of tell with her energy whether it's time to take it off or not.
Okay.
On the street, it's anybody that tries to pet her.
Eye
get-
contact.
Yeah, they probably get like, what, 5 seconds of petting before she flips on them.
Anybody staring at her, looking at her,
Mm-hmm.
she'll match their eye contact and she gets aggressive.
Sure.
And sometimes it's just anybody acting funny, like anybody that walks a certain like funny, anything that kind of just is out of the normal,
Sure.
she just growls at them.
We got her when she was, I think, between 6 and 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
And she's very brash. She doesn't show any signs of like having been beaten or like an aggressive past.
Okay.
I kind of just feel like this is something that we need to suppress in her.
Okay. If you were to have someone come over, right, and not do the whole introduction process like you have,
Yeah.
how would that work out?
Probably not well.
Okay. Have you ever seen that before? Does she start barking? Does she, you know, go for the door? Does she like, if the person tries to come in, does she move forward towards the person, or have you just completely avoided that?
We completely avoid it.
Okay. So go ahead and hold on to her there. So she's posturing a little bit. I'm gonna use this just to kind of put some pressure on her. You just keep right at her. Yeah, there's the tension.
And with her, it's kind of, once you're in, you're in. Like my friends could walk up to her and do anything.
No problem.
I've had a friend come a year later. There was a year gap between she remembered and she was fine.
The dogs are pretty good about remembering stuff. So like if she comes into the person's space and like let's say they ignore her, right? Like I don't make any contact here. Have you ever had any issues with that?
Maybe once or twice, but no, it's mostly eye contact, obviously paying her attention.
I mean, we live next to Wrigley Field, and if we walk her on game day, we can walk her through the crowd. She's not going to pick anybody up, doesn't care. It's as soon as they engage with her, then she kind of tries to get the upper hand.
Have you ever noticed anything about the person's energy? Like are they like, oh my god, look at your dog? Or is it just-
High energy, she matches it.
Okay. If someone were to approach her calmly, would you still think, is it still gonna be a problem, or do you find like she's more?
We find it's too much of a risk, so we typically just try and keep people.
Okay.
It would probably still be a problem now.
Does she trigger with loud noises or anything? Like, does a spook her? Do you see her kind of get kind of jumpy?
Not really,
The
no.
only thing she really jumps at is when she's under the train.
Sure.
That's about it.
Okay, train goes over. Okay. I'm trying to figure out what the cause of the response is.
She's very playful, like we kind of have to suppress the aggression in her. It's like she really wants to play tug of war, she really wants to play fight, and then as soon as she gets mouthy, we shut it down. But it seems like that's something instinctually that's in her, and that's kind of like her default mode. At least that's what we've gathered.
Okay, so because you're saying to give it what to play, like she's just like, oh, like
It's just something she wants to do, and it's like her go-to.
Well, she's a power breed. Like I have a pit myself, and she loves the rough house, and I'll grab her jowls and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So it's nothing so much that I would, how do you say? I don't think they're related. That's just as a power breed, she's just got a more of a gladiator type style of play.
What are the other reasons? Because she doesn't really show signs of fear, I don't think.
Sure, yeah, that's what I'm trying to pick up here. Because the aggressive response can come from fear, nervousness, anxiety, territorial behavior. And territorial doesn't always mean property, like you yourself are a personal space. So then like she could be territorial over you outside. It can also be that she just doesn't like certain energies, because if a dog is calm, she's fine and she'll trigger play. But if they escalate, then she, like you said, she'll reciprocate, right? If someone comes into her personal space and they're high energy, like, oh my God, that she doesn't like that. She, I'm assuming quick to trigger, like growl or whatever. And that's typically one of two things. One is either nervousness, or two, it's overstimulation, which I'm not really picking up overstimulation here. She seems like a pretty chill dog.
Yeah.
Nervousness, there was a tiny bit when I went to go touch her. I don't know if you saw her body flinch.
Yeah.
Yep, that's a nervous response. Okay, so that's why I asked, does she get spooked with loud noises? Like let's say a car backfires, or there's like a loud random sound. A nervous dog will typically like jump and trigger, like bark at it.
Well, she's got her quirks. This is like a skateboard, the train, but overall, if we're walking, I can walk her through like a busy street typically, and she'll be okay.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So the other, if it's not nervous, it's for me like everything adds to one of those. I'm just not seeing a whole lot of one of those behaviors. Typically, when I come in, right off the bat, I go, oh, that's a scared dog, that's a nervous dog, that's an anxious dog, or a mixture of those three, and that's what's fueling everything. Here, it's either she just has boundaries, which is perfectly fine. It's just in our world, it doesn't transfer very well because dogs set boundaries with their mouths, and like, the way I perceive dogs in the world and all that stuff is very different than how the world actually does. Like everybody believes your dog should be able to be touched by everyone and everything, and I don't believe in that, because not even humans do that, right?
Yeah, and that's not something we're aiming for. I don't care if anybody pets her on the street.
Right, you're just like a more realistic context of like people coming in the home, and then of course socializing with friends, what have you, and with like the dog stuff, are you getting is there any leash reactivity, or is she pretty chill when she walks past dogs unless they like?
She'll look at them, like she obviously notices them, but unless they engage her, she typically won't give them the time of day.
Gotcha.
She gets really tense and then kind of she wants to play, but she tries to provoke the dog into playing with her, so she'll kind of fake and
Sure.
And if it's an older dog that's calm, she won't do anything. If it's a younger dog that wants to play, she'll engage.
Okay. So what are you hoping to achieve? What are your goals here?
Well, one of the main things is we'd like to be able to take her home for the holidays, obviously.
Okay, yeah, right.
So go somewhere else. Have people come in our home. I'd like to I'm not saying we should have everyone come up on the street and pet her, but if someone comes up from behind and does do that, I'd like her to, not be able to react.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, we live in the back of our house. Our apartment's in the back half. So our neighbors are taking out the trash, and we can't take her outside if people are throwing away the trash at the time. Like, we have to hold her in the corner.
Yeah.
What happens there?
Anything in the alley on our back patio, that's hers.
That's her turf. She'll go.
Yeah.
So okay.
So we have to look out the door, make sure no one's there, take her down. Usually once we get about 30 yards away from the house, she's fine.
Okay, and how would you like that to work out ideally?
Just walk right behind. I mean, maybe say hi, but.
So like not have to worry about like the people clearing before actually going down?
Yeah, I mean, that's just an anxiety that I don't want to have anymore.
Oh, sure, I understand. What else?
I mean, I just want to trust her.
Okay.
I don't trust her in the extent that one day she might bite someone and it would be out of my control.
Sure.
One thing that makes me nervous sometimes is turning corners in the street.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I had a mom and her kid, and she kind of jumped at them because they were coming from the right.
Mm-hmm.
She was on my right,
Mm-hmm.
and I just don't trust her 100% that she won't ever, go after someone.
Gotcha. When you walk her out, do you walk her muzzled or no?
No.
No? Okay. When's the last time you've seen something?
Aggression out of her?
Yeah.
Last week.
If a skateboard passes, 100% of the time she'll try to
Okay,
attack.
that's reactivity?
Yeah.
Sure. Was that last time a skateboard?
No, it was just two people.
Was it around the corner?
It was around the corner.
Okay.
I think it started a little bit, but then she reacted and growled.
Did she just growl or did she move forward?
She moved forward.
Okay. How intensely?
I would say 100%.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I don't have to pull either of us over, but, it's enough to have to muscle her back in.
Gotcha.
If we were a lot smaller, she would have dragged us.
Okay. Has she ever had a bite attempt or a nip?
She's jumped somebody before,
Okay.
but not actually bit.
She's never bit down on anyone. I don't know if that's our reaction time or the fact that maybe she is all bark. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, well, I mean, dogs are very black and white, Like if there's going to be a bite, like it's going to happen, or, you're going to see the attempt, it's going to be very clear.
And they're not gonna miss.
And whether or not, like if she goes for the attempt and you pull her back, then that's more so you intervening than it is like her not wanting to commit or not wanting to do a full-on bite.
Yeah.
Right, so like this is a dog bite, and I got like 5 more scars all over me that are dog bites where they're intended, like you're gonna get bit, right? And whenever anybody says like, oh, the dog almost bit me, I'm like, no, the dog was gonna bite you, but they just decided not to. Like they're very good with depth perception and all that stuff. So unless you're quick on that and you actively see like the mouth opening and the snap happening, So it's interesting here. I mean, I'm looking at her. I mean, she looks chill. She is clearly uncomfortable the way she's holding herself in her eyes and everything.
That's
the
the
muzzle.
muzzle. She'd be much more confident with the muzzle on.
You can remove it. And that's a slip chain, correct? On her neck?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have me go and clip or leash that slip chain instead. No, go ahead and put the slip on, and you're gonna clip or leash to the slip chain.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. There you go. And go ahead and just bring her up in front of you. Short leash, there you go. Try that again. So she's backing up. I mean, she doesn't want to be touched, like she's not crazy about it. So I'm not picking up any real signs of tension there. Yeah, so you see that? Okay, so what I can see, the growling stuff, the lunging stuff, the reactivity stuff is actually for me the easiest part of this. Okay, I'm just still trying to figure out where she's coming from in terms of the touch. She doesn't want to be touched. I can see that because every time I moved in, you saw that back pedal,
Yeah.
right? So if she's proactively trying to move away from these people that you've ever seen, like that's the first giveaway of like, hey, like don't like, give me space, and a lot of people won't see that. Or if you don't see that physical manifestation of the backing away, it's still happening mentally. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I can't remember her ever physically backing away. I think if anything, she engages.
She engages, yeah. So, because if I move into a dog and they back away and they continue to move into them and they're like, I can't get away from you, I'm expecting to see aggression, right? Here she gave us the physical back away, but that tells, I was very clear, like, I don't want anything to do with you, right? Now she didn't do anything, but I can see that she was just like, yeah, like whatever. So I would think outside, either if she can't or she's caught off by surprise or the person's energy, like there's no, in her mind, like desire or want to be touched, which then most likely leads to the escalation of like the behavior, the growling, or the lunge or whatever. Coming around the corner and being startled like that, that's pretty typical stuff. Nothing out of the ordinary because it is so abrupt. Like I think you said you yourself were startled, right, when you came around the corner or something?
I was startled at her reaction.
You're startled, okay, gotcha. But for dogs, I mean, that's a very common thing. So when we deal with reactivity, there's a spectrum. Reactivity towards humans is almost always the first thing that goes first. So like dogs that bark at construction workers or dogs that bark at skateboarders and stuff like that, that tends to always go away first. Then it's barking at calm dogs, then excited energy or puppy type energy is in the middle. Other reactive dogs and the sudden run-ins with dogs like the corner one are end of spectrum. Okay, because if the other dog is being reactive and they're putting out threat, and for her, it only makes sense to put threat out back. Okay, so she's just like returning that energy. When it comes to the sudden run-ins, they're just caught off guard, and you can't plan for those things. Like it's going to happen, and you don't know when. That's why those two tend to take the longest. Okay, if the dog's like quote unquote talking crap to her, she'll talk crap back, and then she thinks she's validated on it. Now you can correct it, you can absolutely stop it. It's just it tends to take longer because also that person may want to remove themselves from the scenario, and if they remove themselves and she's still being reactive, she thinks her reactivity garnered that response and then it reinforces it.
Right, it worked.
Yeah, and then with the sudden run-ins or like the turn around the corners, like you just can't plan for that. So, your main concern really is, of course, feeling comfortable with the control you have over her, not getting these blow-ups or reactive moments, the aggression responses. And then I think you'd also wanted to cut out the part of like having to meet people outside and bring them into the home. Like, is that correct?
Yeah, I just don't want aggression to be her default go-to when she feels. So when she's uncomfortable in a situation, I want her snapping at someone not to be her immediate response.
Okay.
This might be a stupid question. Is it unreasonable that we'd ever be able to, trust 100% that she wouldn't harm someone? Is that something you could
guarantee?
Is it a goal? And you can't guarantee.
Right. So
behavior, but I mean,
think of behavior as this. Like, let's say I'm an alcoholic, right? And I go to AA or whatever, right? I see someone, a therapist or whatever, and I ask them that same question. Like, can you tell me like 100%? Like, I won't ever like relapse or whatever. Like, no one can do that, right? And it's the same thing for dogs, because think of aggression as like the escalated form of anger, right? So if someone like has anger management issues and they go to see a therapist and they're like, and then the therapist is like, oh yeah, I'll make it so you'll never get angry in your life again. Like, we go bullshit. Like, that's not feasible, right? So same thing for the dog. It's more so educating you. Well, there's a couple of components. One is I get rid of that harness because that harness actually promotes or reactive or aggressive responses.
We had a prong collar, and another issue that we can talk about later was her stubbornness on walks, but it was digging into her neck, so we switched it. Do you recommend going back?
No, you can keep your slip, and I'll talk about remote collar and how that stuff works.
We don't walk her with this in general.
Sure, you walk around the harness. That harness though, however, does, like all the other behaviors that the turning the corner stuff, like all that can be escalated due to harness. Okay. So that's just one thing to bear in mind. I'll explain more about how that works. So there'll be a couple of things here. One, I would just get some formal discipline into her brain, because discipline changes the way the dog perceives the world. So like me growing up, I was raised with spanked. If my mom said don't do that, it was just don't do that until the first day I got spanked. Right? Now don't do that had a totally different meaning because there was physical consequence behind it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So for dogs, it's very similar. The human version of doggy discipline is usually like clapping and saying no, or scolding their dog, or putting them in timeout, or things like that, right? And that's not dog discipline. Dogs don't put each other in timeout. they don't scold each other, they bite each other, right? So if a dog does something she doesn't like, she goes, hey, I'm gonna correct you and put you in your place. Don't behave that way around me, right? That's dog. And that's why there's a difference between corrections and aggression, because aggression is they're using that response for everything that they don't want to either tolerate or everything they don't want to, or anything they don't want to deal with when they go under stress. So if a dog is fear aggressive and anytime a human tries to touch them, they become aggressive, it's consistent, right? It's every time you try to touch me, I'm going to go into aggression to keep you away from me, right? A correction would be, my dog can be pet by anybody, but then when like a person pulls on their ear, my dog nips at them. That's a correction. That's not aggression, right? Because the dog's fine with being pet with anybody, but until they pull that dog's ear, now there's a problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So here, like the reactivity stuff, the skateboard stuff, the growling if something's too sudden, like all that stuff is, for me, I would say the easiest to get rid of. Okay, once you get rid of that tension, then ideally we shouldn't see the other stuff, because she's not even going to one. Does that make sense? If she's not going to growl, then you shouldn't see what's beyond growling.
Do you think that in her case it's easier because she's not like, I don't know what the right word would be, but like damaged from a past?
Like stable? Or do you mean like?
I mean, she wasn't, it's not like she was beaten, it's not like she's...
Oh, that stuff doesn't matter. I've had dogs that were like clearly abused. I've worked with dogs that had bullet holes and stab wounds and stuff, and they're the sweetest dogs.
And that doesn't make it harder or easier to...
Because she doesn't think about, even if like that was the case, like she doesn't think about the past. She thinks about right now. Okay? And the most common thing that I see in those cases is that either the owner feels bad, I'm not saying this here, but in the cases I've worked with, typically the owners feel bad because the dog's passed. So they don't want to discipline the dog. And like, it doesn't matter if the dog did come from an abusive home or whatever, like the dog still needs discipline. That's why there's issues going on there. But the owner feels bad because of the dog's past. They don't want to do that to make the dog think that they're like in an abusive home. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it gets pretty complicated. But to answer your question, it's more so we get her in a good place mentally, and you're educated on what's realistic and what's not realistic, and things that I would like perceive might happen, right? So what makes me an effective trainer is that when, like, if I come into a nervous case, I already know all the things that nervous dogs do. So I'm like several steps ahead. So when I do the program with that particular client, I already know things I need to touch upon. So like I have a dog right now who, because of COVID, we didn't do a formal consultation, and the dog's aggression was actually far greater than I anticipated. And finally, when we tested it, the dog was attacking when my handler was going into the home. She's very nervous, so I knew if there was quick movement, running, or fast walking in the home, the dog would trigger. I knew if the dog was on the couch, she would trigger. I knew if my handler took the leash, she would trigger. I already knew all these things. So little by little, we had to tackle everything and correct all those behaviors until eventually he could come in and walk around and she didn't do anything, right? But I already knew all the things to press, and each class was like a different topic. Because for a dog, being aggressive, like if a dog shows aggression over food and a dog shows aggression over someone entering the home, even though they're both aggression, they're two different contexts. So they have to be worked on separately.
So you have to train each one.
Yeah, so for this particular case, like literally it was my handler just walking by her, then it was running, then it was jumping, then it was going near her on the couch, then it was going near her when she was with her owner. It was like all these things that we had to tackle. But as we got farther along, everything was correcting and stopping much more easily. So eventually we could just come in and then she would just suppress herself and not get into aggression. Okay? So, but her, when I tried to touch her, like I did here, like she was already curling her lips, she was getting very clear visual cues of like, hey, I'm gonna bite you if you continue this. Whereas here I didn't see anything, right? And then you saw me like doing all this other stuff, because a lot of times when dogs are quote unquote jerks, like they're not anxious, nervous, or fearful or anything like that. They're just kind of like, yeah, I disagree with certain energies and stuff, like a bully, actually, if you will. That kind of stuff will trigger them.
Are you guessing that's what we're looking at here?
A bully? No, I just think that you have a dog that just has some boundaries. I mean, she looks, from what I can see, completely stable. I think it's potentially just, lack of formal training, lack of formal discipline. The harness, I understand why you switch to it, but that does escalate problems. Harnesses promote pulling, and when dogs feel tension, it tends to create negative feelings. Like it's called opposition reflex. When a dog feels pressure, they want to go against it, but that builds frustration. So in protection training, so like when we train dogs to actively be aggressive towards humans, we have the agitator, and then we have the person who holds the dog on a harness, because we want nothing inhibiting the throw. And we know if we put the dog on a harness, it's kind of like holding someone back from a fight. Like they get really frustrated and they just want to go even more. We use that to build more frustration to eventually build the dog to a biting phase. So a lot of people, especially with puppies, put them on harnesses, and over the course of time unintentionally make them aggressive, because every time they see dogs, they're pulling them away, and then they relate that negative tension to every time they see dogs. So next thing you know, they see dogs, now it went from a friendly puppy is now a frustrated puppy to an agitated puppy to now an aggressive dog who lunges and barks and tries to bite because of all that negative tension built up over years. Okay, so I'm assuming like with the people coming into the home, like you just want to have a more straightforward, you can come on up to your place and then just enter the home type of thing, right? So there's an exercise that I cover with that. So I would be interested to see how she responds if someone just knocked and came into the home, because that would tell me a lot more about her. Kind of like with that one dog, like I didn't know the level of aggression until we finally sent someone in to go into the home, and then it was up there. It was pretty bad. So that'll tell me a lot more about her too, and if there's anything that needs to be addressed, because we definitely want to get that squashed. So the way I would perceive this or foresee this going forward is we definitely need to get a heel down, which is leash walking. Okay, my style of heel is very strict. If I take one step, the dog takes one step. I take 5 steps, they take 5 steps. I stop, they come to an automatic sit. Okay, this is a completely slack leash. I don't care what the environment is. I don't care if you're over out in this busy in Wrigleyville, if you're inside a PetSmart, or if you're walking by a dog park, or if there's a skateboarder coming by. I want her, boom, right there, no tension, very focused. The reason why that's so important is that it puts rules to her, helps settle that brain down. And what's going to be essentially the reference point for the skateboard reactivity, for when you turn around the corner and there's someone there and catches you off by surprise, or any other thing that she would typically trigger for when you're on the walk. Okay, because she's more tuned in with you, and she's not going to care about what the environment is. That's usually the first thing I do with a case like this. Because when I went into her space and stuff, like she didn't give me any active aggression, right? So if I'm dealing with an aggressive dog, like it's going to come out. Like when I go to touch, it's going to show itself, right? I just needed that here. And when I crouched down and went to her space, she just came over wagging her tail, fairly loose. The most that I saw from her was the twitch when I touched her initially, and then when we took the muzzle off when I went in, her backing off. But even when she backed off and like stopped, and I kept touching her, and she didn't do anything. So that's the tricky part. Is I know you've seen it, but she's not giving anything here. So that tells me I'm not really perceiving an aggressive dog, so to speak. It's more so a dog that's probably frustrated or has tension, and it's going to those responses. And I'm pretty sure that harness is a big factor in that as well.
Yeah, and I think we've added to some of her frustration unintentionally. She was a pretty good walker on the leash until this summer. We started bringing her to the lake, and we never had before. And then every time after that, when we would leave the lake, she would just slam on the brakes. So I think she thought that she was in trouble when we were leaving the lake. So we started to integrate treats into the walk coming back. And then it's just the last like 4 or 5 months or so been a shit show with her walking. Like I think she's confused, and I think we're trying to egg her on with treats, and then I think it's just kind of clashing.
Sure, but like if she doesn't want to move forward and like the food's not going to motivate, e-collar will fix all that stuff. Okay. Anything else there?
With the walking?
Just in general.
I'd like to get her. She's really not been off a leash.
Okay.
At all. I mean, minus a handful of times.
Sure.
She snowballs pretty quickly to where like you let her off the leash and she'll run around, and at one point like she wants to play fight, you can't get a hold of her and she's running in circles. And I mean I kind of I think I know how to fix that. but there's not a lot of places where I feel like I can bring her
Feel comfortable?
safely.
Sure. Okay, so you need recall essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So we have heal, we have recall. Anything else obedience-wise you'd want her to do?
I mean, around the house, she's great.
Yeah,
She's
okay,
perfect.
great.
Like she matches her energy. If we're watching TV, she'll watch TV. If we're jumping around, whatever, she'll play with us. But like, no complaints around the house. It's just with no one else there. It's just outside the house. We want to be able to trust her completely.
Okay. So yeah, the way I go about this is there's 2 classes on heal, 2-part exercise. I teach the first half, the first class, and the second half, the second class. And during that week, I would tell you if there's times that you avoid or places that you avoid because of her behavior, you don't avoid them. I would tell you to confront them because that's how we're going to know whether or not we're making progress, right?
Okay.
So like, let's say, for example, there's a skate park by you, go to a skate park, right, after that first class. And then you come back to class 2 and you might say like, hey, Jessie, it was a shit show for the first few days, but then we kept going. Now she's great. And we see skateboards and she doesn't blow up. We can keep going by, she's completely calm. It look great. Like we got that out the way, right? And then obviously the turning around corner stuff is gonna be time because that doesn't happen. At least I don't think it happens like on a consistent basis.
Right.
But anything that you would be out walking her, and then like if you notice something like, oh wow, that would usually trigger her, and she didn't trigger, it's good. Because we tend to think that when we go into behavior work, that we go in to create the problem so that we can just punish it, right? But when I get a dog like this, where I'm like, I know you're having your issues, but when I come and I do this stuff and she gives me nothing, there's something off there, right? That I go, we're gonna see what discipline fixes. Okay, just formal discipline and consequence, see what it fixes, and then from there we'll kind of figure out how to tackle all the other stuff, right? When it comes to socializing, like if that was something you wanted to do, like with maybe like your family members and things like that, I do have a very structured way of socializing. And if that's something you want to integrate, like either into your approaches you're already doing yourself, or like when you go to travel, like for the holidays or whatever, it's something that you can incorporate there just to help her open up to people and all that stuff more quickly, okay? The recall is 2 classes in itself, but recall does take longer to teach. So I can teach you everything you need to know, and then you just got to practice. Because recall requires you to go somewhere and have her, be on the long leash while you're training and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So if you go once a week, like you're going to teach a recall, but it's going to take a really long time to teach a recall. If you go 3 times a day, you're going to get it much faster because you're going 3 times a day, right? Leash walking is usually very simple because everybody walks their dogs at least 3 times a day to go potty in the city. So that's usually the fastest thing that dogs learn, and the recall tends to be the slowest thing they learn because it just takes time to travel and go somewhere unless you like happen to be conveniently located in front of a park. The behavior stuff, it's really just play it by ear, because technically the whole healing exercise should fix the back porch thing, like going out and all that stuff. Because like let's say she did trigger, right? For whatever reason, like maybe someone's throwing a garbage bag, whatever, and it startles her, and she starts to become reactive. You now have a tool that can stop the behavior. Okay, so ideally we don't want to see the behavior because that means everything's working. But in some cases, if like either the moment is too intense or maybe she's caught off guard, you may see a response, but now you have a tool that's going to allow you to shut it down or suppress it, as you guys were saying earlier, to teach her that response is not a valid response. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's like you can lunge and bark, but then you're going to be corrected, or you can just accept it, avoid it, or ignore it, and nothing happens. So we teach her that there are other options to things when she goes under stress, and not always the aggressive response.
And do you reward her every time she doesn't?
I don't.
Okay.
You can, but it just makes your job more complicated. Okay, so dogs don't reward each other. If like the mom comes in and if the puppy's acting up, they just correct the puppies. There's no reward afterwards, right? Now I'm not opposed to it, and if after you've done everything and you've learned the skills and it's easy for you and you want to add it in, that's perfectly fine. But typically in the beginning, because you're not dog trainers, like it's too much stuff. Because then you have your dog, you have your leash, you have your e-collar, you have the food, right? You have all these things going on within the moment, like the stressor and all that stuff, that I try to minimize it as much as possible so that we don't have to worry about all those things, okay? Because it makes it pretty complicated. And it's not necessary in my opinion, but we can, over time, incorporate it to incentivize just the whole positive association with people. Okay? Questions on that?
Yeah, one question I did have is, one of the reasons we haven't gotten too far with her aggression in the house with people coming in, it's kind of hard to do. You can't just have someone come in and see how she reacts. How do you know, how can you tell when she is possibly ready for that to happen?
So when it comes to people entering the home, when that doorbell or door knock happens and like the dog starts barking or whatever, that's territorial behavior. It's completely normal, it's completely healthy. You know, oh, it's just Amazon or UPS or my friend's coming over at 5:30, right? She will never know that, okay? So when she hears that knock and you're like, oh, that's my buddy, she's like, what's the potential threat at the door? Like, that's how dogs break doors, right? So most dogs, the very like people-friendly ones, they'll bark because their instinct is kicking in. But when the owner opens the door and they see it's a human, they go, oh, I love humans, right? So they just don't perceive threat anymore because they see that it's a human. Other dogs will trigger and stay in suspicion. So the knock happens, they trigger who's at the door, then the owner goes to open the door and the dog goes like, who is this, right? And I've had people have, friends over, the same friend over several times, and the dog still doesn't like them. Because when they kick into territorial mode and become suspicious, it doesn't allow the brain to go into curiosity and to kind of open up and go like, oh, okay, you're not a threat, okay? So I have a specific exercise that I cover. It's essentially you communicating with her to tell her like, hey, I know someone is here, but you need to settle down, back off, and relax.
So even if they're suspicious, they know not to react?
So you'll always have the trigger. She'll always bark or whatever, right? Because she literally cannot help that when that knock or the doorbell happens. So then you come in and then you communicate back, hey, thanks for letting me know, but you need to relax and calm down. And there's an exercise that you would be doing to settle her down. So let's say, like I get dogs that will try to nip or bite at people coming into the home. And I told the owner, the problem isn't nipping or biting. The problem is you have a very territorial dog and they're trying to keep your guest out by using this aggressive response. So if you address the territorial behavior and you shut that down, there's nothing to fuel nipping and biting. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like if she's jumping on you, jumping isn't the problem. What's the problem?
The actual biting.
Well, we're not talking about biting here, jumping. So like, let's say right now she jumped on you.
Oh, this.
Yeah, right, she's jumping on you. What's fueling the jumping?
Excitement?
Yes.
I was going to say boredom.
Boredom, right? So that would come out of frustration, right? She's bored, her brain wants to do something, frustration kicks in, then the jump. A lot of times jumping is, excitement, for example. So in that moment, like you said, jumping isn't the problem. Excitement is.
That's what causes it.
Right, so if I address the excitement, I shouldn't see jumping. So in another case, for instance, going back to those dogs that are human friendly, a person opens the door, guest comes in, dog is jumping all over the person, right? We want to address the excitement. Okay, if you address the jumping, yes, you're addressing the behavior, but you're not addressing the root cause. Okay, so then it becomes a constant problem. Once we address this, we shouldn't see the jumping. Is how all this stuff works. That's why, like, when I come in and do these consults, I'm trying to figure out like what's the root of this, because then that helps me figure out how we're going to progress with it.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that all make sense?
Yeah.
So with the guests coming in, it's essentially practice. And it's a weird time right now. People not coming over. I've had clients whose dogs were completely social. Then COVID quarantine happened. 3 months later, they had like their relative over. The dog tried to bite the relative because they went 3 months of isolation and nobody coming over, and the dog just became very territorial. I've had a lot of dogs develop separation anxiety. Dogs that have developed similar issues to yours here on a higher degree because of just quarantine. So there's a lot of things that have changed. The good thing about the exercise is that it's not like training, like it's not like obedience, where you have to practice the teacher, right? This is really just communication. So like, let's say we taught you the exercise and then 2 weeks go by before you can practice it or actually apply it. It's the same deal. But since it's not training, it's not about sit, stay, come, it's about communication. Relax, settle down, go over there and chill out, right? That it's not, repetition isn't needed as long as you have a firm grasp of how the exercise works.
Like you were saying, that's something that would need to be addressed at our house. We couldn't
Correct,
have
yeah,
kids here.
Which we can set something up, like, so what I would do is I'd probably send Enrique, who's one of my trainers here. He's the one that's been doing the in-home visits. I'm there via Zoom, and he goes in with the suit. Okay, so like I have my bite sleeve here, and we have a suit, it's a 60-pound suit that protects the wearer.
Yeah.
So they can just come into the home, and it'll help you get a better read on what she's about, right? Because I tried here, but she didn't give me anything. It could be different at the home. You know, it could be different because of her territory. Or it could be like, she gives up a big front, but she doesn't try anything. It just looks mean because she's a dog and we see barking and all that stuff as like aggressive responses, but then she ultimately doesn't do anything, you know? So it'll help us get a better read on that, but then also you can practice the exercise in a controlled context so you can focus more on the learning how the exercise works as opposed to like worrying about what happens if I don't do it correctly, okay? So e-collar, did you guys do any research on that or on me or the methods or anything?
I saw that was something you recommended, but
Yeah.
maybe on that.
So all my dogs that are older than 6 months are trained on e-collar, okay? The reason why I do e-collar is because it's the most efficient, most effective training tool. One, we don't have to worry about technical skill. Two, it's non-confrontational, the dog doesn't know where it's coming from. Three, I can match the dog's intensity. So if I do have a dog that's being aggressive and actively attacking, my collar goes 0 to 127 in increments of 1, that I can really fine tune it to the dog to stop the aggression.
Is it a shock?
It's, have you ever been to a physical therapist or a chiropractor?
No.
Have you?
Yeah.
Have you had stem therapy?
Yeah.
That's an e-collar.
Okay.
So e-collar is a miniaturized TENS unit. If you go to Walgreens or CVS and you look in the back section, the back pain management, whatever, you'll see what's called a PENS unit, and it looks like a little bone. And you put it on your back, and it's a slight current that contracts the muscles.
Okay.
So it's electric, but not electricity is how I explain it. It's not like a taser. It's not like sticking your finger in an outlet. It's a centralized current that only affects where it's making contact. So it's going to be on her neck, and you'd only see this moving. You wouldn't see anything anywhere else going on. Okay. The reason why it's very effective is because dogs are physical animals. They bite each other, right? So think of the e-collars as our means of biting her at the press of a button. So I'm not, in this case, looking to come in trying to force the problem. I know there's a problem, but I'm going, what happens if I just discipline her and just get some, structure in the brain? What does it address? And a lot of times that structure itself fixes 70 to 80% of problems. So if you do the training, you're like, man, it's been 8 months and we've had all these opportunities for her to be, that she would typically trigger over. She's done nothing. That's how it works. Okay. Now, if we get caught off guard and maybe she starts barking or lunging because someone's throwing garbage out in the back, you now have a means of stopping it. Okay, which then teaches her, if done correctly, to not do it again. So aversives are meant to stop things, right? So if you're driving your car and you get a ticket for speeding, that ticket is to deter you from speeding again,
Yeah.
right? But of course, dogs don't have any kind of financial consequence or anything like that. They're all about physicality. So the e-collar allows us to train her very effectively, very easily. It allows you to get your off-leash recall. It's the only tool that allows you to get off-leash recall as close to 100% as possible. Okay, treats aren't going to do anything. If there's other stimuli or things that are more rewarding, if she's on a prong collar or a slip chain or whatever it is, any kind of training tool, as soon as you remove that leash, you now no longer have a connection with her.
Yeah.
Right? E-collar, you have a connection.
Do you mean like once she passes a certain radius that you're not comfortable with, then you how does the e-collar?
So the e-collar is very nuanced. Technically, what you said there is true. You could do that, right? It's like, let's say if I have my dogs off leash, I want to give them a 30-foot radius to run around, and they'll stay within that radius. But like maybe there's something over there that's distracting, and they start to go outside that radius. Technically, I could use the e-collar to say, nope, that's too far. My dogs will naturally come in, and they'll stay within that 30-foot radius. Or I could do a recall and call them in closer, and they come into me, and then they go, okay, now you're free to be loose again. Okay, so e-collar is very nuanced. Think of obedience as like strict control. When I say this, you do this, right? If I say sit, you put your butt down. When I say lay down, you lay down, you don't move for like the next 2 hours. Like obedience is very strict black and white control that looks a specific way. And then we have like management, communication. So that's the whole, oh, you're too far away, tap, tap, you need to come in closer because I don't like you going out that boundary, okay? And then there's like, don't do that behavior, like, growling when you pass by someone or lunging and barking when you see a skateboarder. Ideally, with the obedience stuff and the discipline, we don't see reactivity. Okay, that's what we're hoping for. But if we do see it, we have the means of stopping it as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And because every dog learns different. The first approach is always indirectly discipline. What does it fix? Direct approach is, you know, if I have a dog that's actively aggressive towards people, when someone, let's say if I enter the home, the dog tries to attack me, obedience is going to fix the attacking. They're completely not related, right? I need to correct the attacking first before I worry about anything else. In your case, she's not doing that. Like, I know you've had moments, but she didn't give me anything, so that tells me there's inconsistency.
Yeah.
So I'm going to discipline her. What does that fix? And then from there, that tells us what we need to do after that. Okay? I'm trying to think if I have any cases right now that are similar. I have Mia, who's the one I just told you about, but her case I have to do more in a more in-depth video because it is very, how do you say, it's a high level of aggression. You know, like, because I record stuff and I put it on YouTube, and the last thing I want is somebody to like watch it and try to do it themselves and like get hurt, right? So I have cases like her that we have recorded, but unfortunately I can't just upload them because of that factor. But I'm trying to think. There's Zyla, she didn't, I think we started recording afterwards. But yeah, I think your case, if all you care about is the behavioral stuff that you mentioned, leash walking, and the come when called exercise, you're like in the 6 to 9 week range. Okay? 2 classes for heel, which is going to be what's going to address his reactivity, you know, growling and a lot of stuff. The going outside in the back patio to like take her out, whatever, that's all. Heel is supposed to resolve all that. Okay? Then 2 classes on recall. And then if you do 6, those last 2 classes, we can work on the behavioral stuff. Like, you know, we can do, one of them is, you know, Enrique coming over to do the whole door exercise to teach you guys. And what I do is I send you a video to watch, so you learn what the exercise looks like. And then at the first beginning of the first half of the Zoom or whatever, I'll ask you for any questions if you think if there's anything that you didn't quite pick up. And then we start the lesson with Enrique, and then, you know, you practice it, you apply it, and then it's just applying it with any guest that may come over. But if you're not going to have people over for a while, then it's kind of like, is it really worth it? In the sense that you might forget it by the time you actively need to use it, realistically.
We will, or she will?
You will. Like, her, because her, it's not teaching her anything. Her, it's communication.
Yeah. I'm
actually teaching you. So I'm teaching you a skill, and then it's like, if like 2 months go by before you have your next guest come over, it's just like, are you going to remember that exercise correctly? Is the only thing that I think about.
Do you guys, I'm meaning to ask, have a location that you guys use to work on off-leash training?
Yeah, we can use in a facility.
Oh, you have it here?
Yeah, so here, this is a 13,000 square foot space. So I have a 5 to 6 foot, 6,000 square foot open space where we can do long leash work and all that stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the aggression stuff is step one. I mean, she really enjoys training and is really smart.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I'd like to take it further with her, but obviously I think that's the first thing that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, no, for sure. So the healing exercise, I know it sounds like it's non-related, but it is, in your particular case, the first thing I would go to. And we could even do the first class on heel, and we could just jump straight into Enrique coming over to your home to see if there's any real aggression there. But the reason why we need that first class is so that she understands what e-collar is. Okay? And then we can take a little tangent, see how she responds with that. And if we find out, like, holy crap, like, she's got some legit issues there, then we can continue to tackle that. But because it was kind of unforeseen, it just affects the timeline. Because if we spend 4 classes trying to affect aggression in the home, you know, that's 1 class on heel, 4 classes on the aggression, that only leaves 1 class left if you're doing 6. Does that make sense?
Right.
But, you know, I tried testing here. I highly doubt it. It can happen because when a dog's in their own home, they're going to be more empowered to protect, whatever. But I'm really not picking that up from what I've seen. Okay? And I've had dogs be labeled as aggressive, similar to yours, by other trainers, and they're not. They're just frustrated or they're overstimulated. And that went unchecked, so then it led to the growling and nipping at people trying to bite, to try to pet them, because the dog was just super wound up. Okay?
And they just didn't know what else to do.
Correct. Because dogs only have 4 responses: fight, flight, avoid, and submission, right? So if she's on a leash, she can't run away. She can't avoid it because it's already there. So it's either I accept this or I fight this. And if you're uncomfortable with something, are you really gonna just accept it?
Yeah.
Right? So that's how where she's coming from. But looking at her hair, I think she's got a very sweet demeanor. There was a couple things of tension that I picked up, but nothing, terrible. She resolved it really quick, and when they went down to her person on her lower level, came over, tail wagging, very relaxed. So, okay. So for when it comes to the e-collar, Maria will send you the make and model that you'll need. It's going to be the 1900S Black Edition. Runs about $299 pre-tax. You can get them on Amazon. So send you some forms to fill out. If you want to learn more about how this is supposed to work, I suggest you go to my YouTube channel. Lesson ones are really good to watch because no one knows what they're doing other than me. Or you can go to a playlist that I have. It's a client highlight or dog training highlights. Click on that list, and there's other client dogs that I've worked with. One that's a really good one to watch is actually looks just like her. The dog's name is Lake, who's a Pittie, who trained with two to three other trainers, and they didn't do anything, and they essentially got demoed in the class. And you can see how she's reactive and how the change from class 1 to class 2. The biggest thing that holds people back is they're too soft. So if you have to go to 70 or whatever to correct the behavior, and you feel bad about going to 70, you're gonna get stuck. Okay. And that's actually what happened with Lake. They made great progress, but then they felt bad having to put consequence on her at a higher number, and then dog started to regress. So the last thing before, because I have a client right now, is people always ask when does the e-collar go away. In my book, when you need it, it doesn't. So whenever you take her off for a walk, you have that collar on. Doesn't mean that you're always using it. It just means that it's present. Okay. So just like people don't go the speed limit on the expressway, like almost everybody speeds, unless there's a squad car, and then all of a sudden everybody remembers what the speed limit is because now there's a consequence. Okay. Same thing for dogs. It's called opportunistic behavior. If they can get away with something, they'll go for it. So she'll know when that collar's on and when it's off. But if she's a great dog in the home, you don't need it. Yeah. When you have guests come over, you might have it on for like the first 5-10 minutes, and then when she's chill, you can remove it. And then when you go for your walks, it's going to be present. But theoretically, you shouldn't be using it all the time as long as you've done the homework correctly. Okay? Questions?
I covered it.
So if you have any other questions that you may have forgotten, you're more than welcome to reach out. Maria will get in contact with you, and if you know anything, and I highly suggest go to the YouTube channel. We got over I think 500 videos now of me working with clients, dogs, and stuff like that. And you can check out again those client highlight or dog training highlight playlists to get a feel for how e-collar works. Because it's a more in-depth, where I break down and actually talk about the video as opposed to watching a purely 1 hour uncut video and you're trying to figure out what's going on. Okay?
All right.
Awesome, gentlemen. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Yeah, you too.
If anything pops up, you let us know. I'll get the door for you here.